Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mindset Matters. My name is Victoria, and I'm very happy to be joined by Jordan again for He Said, She Said. Hello, Jordan. Welcome back to the podcast.
Looks like you almost forgot my name there. It's been a while since we've done this. No,
I know I'm fumbling over my words. It has been a while, and we're excited to be back. Today, Jordan and I are going to talk a little bit about the benefits, I guess from my perspective, the benefits of living abroad or engaging in like slower travel and how moving to a new place can help you kind of gain new perspectives on the world. We're also going to get into a little bit of like the downsides of moving abroad. Jordan and I have both had experiences living on somewhere kind of across the world. So that's kind of the motivation for this episode today. And what are your initial thoughts on this topic?
yeah, for me, it's just kind of funny to even be one discussing this with you because I would have never, if you asked me 5 years ago, 2 years ago even, if I would be someone coming on to talk about traveling and why it's so great, just would never have picked myself to be that person. And I'm just excited to talk about it because I have a lot to share, and so do you. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's funny how things can change and then your whole perspective can change on something once you do it. So that's also kind of part of the motivation for this. So I guess as a little disclaimer, I will say I know that it's not always realistic to just drop everything and like move somewhere new. I know that some people don't really have a desire to do this, and kind of depending on your stage of life, it can be more challenging. But I guess I really want to dive into what I think or I believe to be the benefits of slow travel and how living in a new place can be really beneficial for things like gaining new perspectives, getting a reset on your routine, feeling like you have a fresh start, and a bunch of other things. So, Jordan and I are going to first start by talking a bit about our own experiences with moving abroad. I'm excited to ask you about Australia coming up on almost a year, is it?
Yeah, it's a year this month. Um,
Oh my
oh
goodness.
yeah,
That's
that's
crazy.
kind of crazy. I don't know if you can tell. I'm in a hoodie here. I didn't know it gets this cold. I'm in Melbourne, and it's what is it today? It's 9 degrees outside. So one
Really?
of the great things about traveling is you learn new things, and I did not know it gets this cold in Australia, and I'm not packed for it. So like this is my thickest sweater. I don't have a winter coat, and if you take a look outside, there's people out there in like North Face puffer jackets. Like 9 degrees here feels colder than
Really, really cold.
-5 in Toronto. So it's
It's so funny how you acclimatize too. Like
yeah,
I remember when I was in France, it was the same. It was like 10 degrees and sunny for their winter.
yeah,
And it was a chilly 10 degrees, but like anytime I would tell someone back
yeah.
home, oh yeah, it's like a chilly 10 degrees, they'd be like, I would kill for 10 degrees. Like it's minus 20. What are you talking
I
about?
know.
Like it's,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's the perspective is crazy. Like when I first moved to Australia, I was in like the northern part of it, and when I got there, it was about 23, and my students, when I was teaching there, were wearing jackets. I was like, guys, it's 23 degrees. Like, like it's so cold. Like because they are used to 35 and above. And then yeah, here it's just people are losing their minds over 9 degrees. And I mean, it's cold, but like you said, I am acclimatized to it because 9 degrees to me in Toronto, that sounds like patio season is starting when it starts at 9, 10 degrees. But I don't even
Yeah,
walk outside today and it's 9, so it's crazy.
I know. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess while we are here, we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences, some benefits, some downsides, and then like how people can make it happen if by the end of this episode they're like, wait, I kind of want to move somewhere new. How can I do this? We'll talk a little bit about that. So I guess first I'd love to know, coming up on 1 year
Mhm.
for an experience that, a couple of years ago you never would have expected. How are you feeling about having experienced Australia for a year and having been away from home for a year, and just where are you at in your headspace right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's an interesting time because I'm approaching that time. My 1 year work visa is coming to an end. Um, and now my girlfriend and I are approaching that time where we have to make the decision. Well, we know we're going back because have a few weddings that we're attending this summer. So we know we're going back for that. But we have to start making that decision of whether or not we're going to stay in Canada, if we're going to stay for a short term, interim term, long term, or do we want to come back here? And there's so many mixed feelings about it. And I think the fact that there are mixed feelings, to anyone who knows me, my friends, my family, the fact that there are mixed feelings lets you know it's been a really good year. Because when I came, the maximum I was prepared to do was 6 months. Like I was leaving in June, and I said I'll be back for Christmas. It's not that long, and here I am. It's June, and I've actually applied for a longer visa where I can stay for 5 longer years. So the fact that it's gotten to that point is, I think a really good sign. And it doesn't mean there hasn't been tough times. Like I'm sure we'll talk about it. There's a lot of challenges with living away from your friends and family and just living in a new country. But it's been an incredible year, and I'm so glad I've done this. So I'm excited to talk more about it as we go along.
Yay. Well, that's exciting. And I love that, you're at that time of, okay, we have to decide, and we don't have to necessarily rush the decision, but it's also here and something we need to figure out. And yeah, I think that mixed feelings are good versus you before saying, yeah, I'll definitely be coming back. Like, there's no way. So I guess one thing is like, what's one thing that you've learned that has maybe shifted your perspective, from being like, okay, I only want to stay 6 months, to wait, this could be something more long term?
Okay, my girlfriend's listening to this. She might fight me back. So what I'm going to say is one thing I've learned doesn't necessarily mean one thing I'm good at. But one thing
Mm.
I've learned is that you don't always need to have a plan. I'm very.
Yay.
No, we've talked about
I
this.
love that for you.
Yeah, you know this about me. We've talked about this. I gotta have a plan, not just what's happening tomorrow, but what's happening the week after that, the month after that, the year. I always try to map it out. Um, and my girlfriend has really helped me understand that it's okay to be really invested and focused on what you're doing and enjoy the moment you're in, and not stress about things that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
Things that, there could be unforeseen circumstances. Like don't stress about something that you have no idea, because the things that you're planning aren't going to happen the way that you're planning. So don't put so much energy into that. Put the energy in what's in front of you. So um, again, I'm not necessarily good at that yet, but I'm improving. I'm getting better at it,
Yeah.
and I think it's allowing me, to be doing what I'm doing right now and living in a country, that I'm not from, and just enjoying every day has been a great experience.
I love that. And do you think that that's a lesson you wouldn't have necessarily learned, or learned in a way that's as applicable, if you hadn't kind of took the leap and done this experience?
I know it's not good to talk in absolutes, but I absolutely would not have learned this without doing it, because
Yeah.
I've just always been that way, planning out. Okay, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get a job, and then I'm going to get a master's, and this is what. Everything had to be connected and make sense. Um, this experience has put me so far out of my comfort zone that I've had no choice but to learn different ways of thinking, and finding comfort in the unknown. So um, without this, I can guarantee I would not have learned these lessons.
I love that so much. And I think that's kind of one of our big points for kind of the benefits of, you know, doing this is it forces you to take action, and taking action is what actually puts those things you're learning into practice, and seeing if you're, ready to take a certain leap, or maybe you do something and it doesn't work out, but you can learn from it.
Yeah,
And definitely, I think the benefit of putting yourself out of your comfort zone, like you just mentioned, is a huge benefit from moving somewhere new, because
yeah,
you're literally forced to figure out a new lifestyle. There could be a culture shock. You have to navigate a new place, meet new people. Like, there's so many things kind of all at once to push you out of your comfort zone, which I think can be overwhelming, but I think it also forces you to kind of navigate it.
yeah.
So, what's maybe been your experience with the culture shock and kind of getting used to being out of your comfort zone?
There's so many things. Like I could waste about 5 hours of your time talking about all of the things. But one thing that's kind of really maybe topical for me right now, as you probably know, I'm a really big sports fan, and that's something that I've almost like taken for granted of how central that is to my personality. My friends talk about sports. When I'm in my free time, I'm talking or watching sports. And I've come to a country where, as you know, we have a massive time difference. So the NFL football games that I watch, the NBA basketball games I watch, they're really difficult for me to watch. And it's taken off so much of my time. And
Mm.
I was really craving something that's so big to me, which is sport. And the sport that's really big here is Australian rules football. Completely different sport, nothing that I can even compare it to. But the people that watch that here and play it, they are equally, if not more passionate about it than, we think of, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL. These are the biggest sports leagues in the world, and monetarily, they're very big. But being able to connect with people over a passion that is similar to mine, but about something different, and being able to take a humble approach where, all right, I like to think of myself as someone who knows a lot about sports, but I know nothing about this sport. I'm not good at it, that's for sure. I don't know all the players, and being able to kind of feel like a kid again and learn, and just be in awe of how big it is in this place. It's been a really fun experience to kind of connect with people over that.
I didn't even know that sport existed. I thought it was rugby, to be honest, when I saw you in your state, like, because you've been to a few games, right? Is
Yeah,
that what you've been to?
yeah.
Okay.
So there's three different footies out here. There's footy, which is Australian football. There's footy, which is rugby league, and there's footy, which is rugby union. So it's a complicated thing. Australians,
Interesting.
they make things easy but hard at the same time. So
Yeah. Do you want to go play footy? Can you be a little more
it's fun.
specific?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's fun though. Okay, but that's really cool that you've been able to connect with people on that. And I think again, that kind of brings in the whole culture element of like learning about a sport. You're still passionate about sports, you're still able to get into it,
yeah,
but it's something that's completely new to you. And just like you said, being a kid again and exploring and like learning about it,
yeah,
I think that that's such a special thing about travel and slow travel, right? Living somewhere new.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, so I guess we'll get into a couple other benefits. And this is kind of coming from like a personal growth perspective, I guess, which obviously we're big on personal growth and mindset on this channel. But one thing I kind of was brainstorming about, and I'd love to know your perspective on this, but moving somewhere new, whether it's, a new city, a new province, a new country, I think it can be really good for someone who's feeling really stuck in their life because it kind of feels like a hard reset, like you're really stepping into a new chapter. And I feel like I like to treat like every month is a new beginning. Like it's June 1st today when we're recording this, and every
Yeah,
time it's a new month, I just feel like reset. But there's something about actually physically going somewhere that feels like you're stepping into this new chapter.
yeah,
And I don't know, I just think the world is so big that who says you have to stay in the same place your whole life?
yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I couldn't agree with that more. And when you use that concept of like feeling stuck, that can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I can really resonate with that because I felt stuck, um, but not. It wasn't so much that I was upset with my routine, but I'll just be really frank. I felt really stuck financially. It was really
Mm.
hard. I had bought my place in Toronto, and money can go different lengths in different places. And moving to Australia, it's a pretty equally expensive country. But I've been able to see different parts of the world at, I guess, a cheaper price. In this
Mm.
past year, I've been to Japan, I've been to New Zealand, I've been to Vietnam, I've been to Thailand. Um, and having access to those places because they're a bit of a quicker flight than it would be from Toronto, just getting different opportunities. And I mean, I know this isn't like a financial podcast, but feeling like, your money can get you more in
Mhm.
different places. It's a real thing. Like the stress that can come from finances especially as we're getting to our age, it's a real thing. And I felt really stuck in that financial thing where I was like, I don't even know what I can use my money for. I'm just trying to pay my bills right now. And there are different opportunities out there is all I want to say. And you can see when you go to different countries that money can mean different things in those countries.
Mm. Yeah, that's a super interesting take. And I think even being open to, okay, if I'm going to temporarily move somewhere, maybe I'll live somewhere for a couple months, but maybe that means I could like sublet and have a roommate,
Yeah,
and that would be cheaper technically than where you might live right now.
yeah,
And I think that can help with meeting people. So just being open to what kind of like maybe living in a new place can look like,
yeah,
and it doesn't need to be this super bougie experience.
yeah, exactly.
And another positive I would say on that is like when you live somewhere or kind of take that slower travel approach, you're not feeling overwhelmed to see a whole city in like 3 days and
Yeah,
then you're moving on.
yeah,
And I think what I experienced, especially living in France, I have such a connection to France and the south of France because I lived there for 10 months. And because it was also during COVID, I actually didn't get to really travel around
mhm,
Europe. But because of that, I think the blessing, the silver lining is I saw a lot of France and I forced myself to go explore as much of France as I could that I probably wouldn't have explored certain areas.
yeah,
And, had I done a 3 week Europe trip, that wouldn't have been possible. Or had I done, again, like a month in Australia, you just can't see as much
right.
and learn like the local way of doing things and see places that you would never have gone to as like a regular tourist.
Yeah,
So I do think that there's something kind of magical about living in a new place, even if
yeah,
it's temporarily, you know. And again, it depends on like your situation. Maybe it's not super accessible to everyone. But we'll talk about ways you can make this happen if it's something you're
yeah.
interested in.
And I think one of the things that and to get back more into that topic of what you meant by stuck, my expectations kind of became fixed. Like Monday through
Mm,
Friday was work. You know, I might play basketball on Tuesday, or I saw my friends on a Wednesday night, but the week started to feel real repetitive. It was like work during the week,
mm,
see your friends and your family maybe once on the weekend. Coming here, it's not that I'm necessarily when you mentioned slow travel. Yes, I've been to Japan. I've been to these great countries, and I've explored Australia. But my Monday through Friday is kind of similar, where it's not that I'm necessarily going and doing all these crazy things, but outside I walk the beach, and I get to do that 3 4 days a week. On the weekend, we go check out these different markets that Melbourne has to offer, and we're really feeling immersed with the culture here in Australia. And I think that what made for people that are locals here might feel just like another day. It's this exciting thing
mm-hmm.
every day. And when you have these, when you get to actually live in a country and you get out of what that routine is that you might have, embedded yourself in where you're living right now, yeah, it's so exciting. Every day just feels a little bit more exciting than the last. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think humans like we thrive on routine and we can't just go like months and months and on end of no routine. But I think again like you're saying is like being able to kind of create a new routine in a new place and like find out what works for you and also be exploring new things is like so special.
Yeah,
And I think it's almost going to make it if you do decide to come back to Toronto, you're going to kind of reacclimatize to this lifestyle. And I think that's going to also be almost exciting in that way
yeah,
after having been away from it. So
yeah.
it's kind of a good way to reset, even if you're not planning on staying somewhere forever.
It's so true because one thing that you do when you travel, I'm not sure if you do this, but I do this every time. I can't help it. I compare where we're at and I try to find similarities to somewhere I've been. And,
Mm.
being here, there's a lot of, a long list of things that I find better about Australia or Melbourne where we are right now than back home. But there's some things I miss. Like back in Toronto, me and four of my best friends, every Wednesday we went to a new bar or restaurant just for like a weekly thing. And we literally went to a new place every week. And we could do that because there was, as you know, there's endless
So
opportunities in
many.
Toronto. the food in Australia, I mean, not very good. And everyone says
Really?
Melbourne is like the capital for the food experience, and there are really good places, but Toronto has so much range in terms of like you can go to dive bars that are really good. You can go to, you know, very specific ethnic cuisine places there. There's not the same opportunity in Melbourne. It is good. It's better than other parts of Australia, but I do miss what we had in Toronto in terms of all of the different places you could try. So yeah,
Yeah.
you do find a sense of appreciation when you leave a place that if you go back, you don't take that for granted as much, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally. Like getting a new perspective will help you, yeah, take things less for granted. And I don't know, just learning new perspectives or new ways of life is just so good for your own personal growth. And I think just being open-minded about the world, like the world is just such a big place. And even how, because you've been living in Australia, you're able to, travel in Asia. Like I haven't been to Asia, and it's just one of those things where it's like you mentioned, it's so far that I'm somewhere that I'm less likely to be able to go
sure.
unless it was a more long-term thing.
Yeah,
So, even doing like regular travel vacations, but from
yeah,
a new
yeah.
home base
Yeah.
is really cool.
No, like I had all these places I wanted to go. Like I wanted to go to Greece. I've been there. I wanted to go to Portugal. That's where my family's from. I've been there. But I never envisioned, like, if you had asked me a year ago what's on your travel list, Vietnam would not have been on there, and New Zealand was not on there. I have absolutely loved traveling to those places. So when you go to new parts of the world and you travel new things, things that weren't even in your purview of what you wanted to do become your new favorite experiences, which is it's a really cool and I guess like underrated perspective of traveling. I think.
Yeah, and just like falling in love with things that you never expected or never sought out and would never have sought out had you not had that opportunity, right? Um, so I guess one of the last things that I wrote down. Ooh, actually, maybe I have a couple more. Ooh, but one that is good. Sorry, I'm looking at a list. I'm like, ooh, what should I say next? No. Um, I think one thing which you actually might have a different perspective on this because I know you were pretty intentional about your friendships when you were home, like you
Yeah,
just mentioned, going for a weekly hangout at least.
yeah,
But one thing I feel like can happen when you move away is that you kind of have to become a little bit more intentional about your relationships back home in that because you don't have as much access to them, you need to be intentional about reaching out
mm,
and maybe scheduling times to connect. Like obviously we do that on our podcast, you know. How do you feel about that? Where
yeah. This is a tough one. Um, it's tough for a variety of reasons because I agree with you. You do have to become more intentional, and what I don't like about it is it becomes like you don't want it to become a routine. Like, hey, I'll call you on Wednesdays. Where
mm,
I miss the spontaneity of friendship. Like, hey, do you want to? There's a fight, like a UFC fight this weekend. You guys want to watch it? Oh, there's this cool new
yeah.
bar I heard of. Do you guys want to go there? Whereas when through a phone and you're FaceTiming or you're texting, it's a lot of catching up.
Mm,
Which that also is maybe part of your late 20s, early 30s. It's a lot of catch up. It's like, what have you been doing with your life?
yes.
Tell me, and you tell me what you've done. I miss enjoying my time with my friends and family. Like I miss that, like creating memories.
Yes.
You know how social media is. Like it's formed to remind you of the past. When you get Snapchat memories, 3 years ago you were at this bar with your friends. Look at this funny memory you guys did. That stuff really hits me now. Like it's like, oh man,
Mm,
we this year we haven't created any memories. Um,
yes.
and it sounds like I don't want to be boo-hoo here, where it's like, well, you're living in Australia, creating amazing memories. You just listed all these places you travel to. That's very true. Um, I'm just trying to explain one of the challenges for me. It's been tough not having my friends and family and being able to just actually be with them. So yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I was talking to a friend about this recently of when you hang out with people and you're just talking about what you've done versus making new memories with those
yeah,
people and experiencing things with them. And it is sad to think, in university, when you're around your friends all the time, the whole thing was just doing things and
yeah,
making memories.
yeah,
And now I feel like a lot of my friendships, it's like, okay, let's meet up. Maybe we go for food or something, and you're kind of chatting about how they've been doing and what's been going on. But it's like, yeah, you're not really creating new memories with them
Yeah.
versus, yeah, that's an interesting take. Have you and Danielle been able to kind of create a bit of a network of people out there, or do you feel like it's often
Yeah.
you two? Like,
This
how's
is
like
a
the
great thing.
friendship
So
life?
I'm like hesitant to say this because I have made friends here, and we follow each
Okay.
other on social media, and I promote this podcast. So if they're listening to this, please don't take this personally. But one thing that's one thing that has been really tough is I have made new friends here. When I was in Queensland, the northern part of Australia, for the first 6 months, I made one friend, like one person that I would consider a true friend, and we stay in touch to this point. In Melbourne, I've made more friends, um, but the challenging thing is, I don't know what it is. It's like I don't let them in. Like I'm like, you guys are my new friends, and
Mm.
my real friends are back home in Toronto. You guys, we're friends because I'm here for now, but this doesn't mean that much to me. It's like that's what I'm feeling internally.
You have this complex about like cheating on your
It's
friends.
very true. It's very true, and it's like I'm like I just put up this wall where it's like we can only be so much of friends. Like we're not gonna be best
Mm.
friends. You're never gonna be my best friend because I already have my best friends, and it's like I can't replace that. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I like that you're like aware of it, but then you're like, yeah, but I
It's
can't. I just can't. Yeah.
it's not gonna change, and I don't know. It's because I do meet. It's weird because when I've met friends at work back in Canada, I'm like, okay, this guy can be one of my new best friends, but I don't know. It's a weird thing about me, and I think it makes it hard because I lack a certain connection here because the people, and I think one thing that's important for me to share is I've had a lot of my same best friends since I was in elementary school, and then the ones that came
Mm-hmm.
after were high school. Like those are my key best friends have been in my life for 20 years.
That's
So
crazy.
it is crazy.
Amazing, though.
It's cool, and I'm proud to say that. Um, but I'm for the first time in my life like lacking a certain type of connection. Um,
Mm.
but the good thing is that Danielle and I do a lot of things, just the two of us, and there's like a pro and con to that because one, I feel like very fulfilled from that time with her, but I'm also putting all of my like social um, responsibility like on her. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to do this. Let's go do this, and yeah, it's just I think that's a lot to put on one person at times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I feel like you're also at a point in your relationship where it hasn't been so long. You're on this
right.
like adventure together that I
Yes.
think it makes sense to kind of cherish
Yeah.
that time that you
Yeah.
guys have and like make those memories together.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, of course, there needs to be balance of
Yeah.
not, being like, we need to do this thing right now.
But does that sound crazy to you when I explain like I? It's not like it's no new friends, but it's like that circle is like impenetrable to me. Like no one. That's when I like make a hierarchy of my best five friends. It's like there's nothing that will allow new people to come in there. Is that crazy?
Yeah. I don't think it's crazy, but I think, letting people in a little bit more, like letting walls kind of drop for new people, doesn't mean that they're replacing other friends. So I
Yeah.
think you could have both, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same type of friendship or the
Yeah.
same. But I think there's is something special about like connecting with people a little deeper and like letting people in, but it does take time. I think especially as adults, like it can be really hard to make new friends.
Yeah.
Um and even I think of, newer friends in my life in the past couple years, like sometimes it's hard to kind of go a little deeper than that surface level or like
Yeah.
we have fun and hang out, but there's like your core people who you want to like really talk to about things.
Yes.
But I guess it's hard when you're away and, if you kind of are feeling like there's a lack of connection, then I think it could be worth
Yeah.
trying to like let people in a little bit deeper. But again, I don't know. As a guy, I feel like it depends on what your conversations are. Like usually guys connect around, you know, sports and doing things, and the conversation doesn't naturally turn as deep as I think
Very true.
women maybe have with
That's very
their
true.
relationships. So,
But back to your original question when you talked about intentionality,
mhm.
this past year, sharing some struggles from traveling, sharing the good things, like talking about a relationship. I have had deeper conversations this year through the phone than I think maybe ever. Like, and it's been weird
Mm.
because it's through FaceTime, it's on a phone. Um, but I have been forced. Like, there's almost like a pressing need sometimes to talk about things.
Mhm.
Um, and rather, like, back when I was in Toronto, like, if I was going through something, I'd be like, okay, I'll just wait till I see my friend to talk about this. But if you're
Mm.
really going through something, you have to reach out to them and say, hey, can we FaceTime? I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. And I guess I didn't actually really think about that until you've asked this question. Where yeah, it does require more intentionality, but that has been one of the hard parts of traveling is just kind of missing that connection that has been so important to me for, as I mentioned, 20 plus years. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think another thing that happens maybe on the phone or FaceTime is because when you're FaceTiming, you're not face to face with someone and
yeah,
you have that barrier. I feel like sometimes it can be easier to talk about certain things. Whereas if you were in person, you might not always bring it up. I mean, I guess it depends on the friend.
yeah,
But I think with certain people, it can almost feel like you're you have the comfort of kind of sitting alone and like they can't see your full body language or if
yeah,
you're really stressed or
yeah.
nervous, but they're obviously on the other end.
And I
So that's
think
another.
I think
Have you
too.
ever found that?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good point. And also, like what you said, like alone, like FaceTiming usually requires one-on-one conversation. Whereas, like
Yeah.
me and my friends, like we hang out in a group every time. It's very rare that I will hang out with another friend one-on-one. If it is, it's like because
Mm-hmm.
someone's not there yet. So
Yeah.
it does allow for that like personal connection of one-on-one. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah. So I guess we can kind of continue with some of the downsides,
Okay,
maybe.
sure.
I think I had one more upside, which was kind of becoming a little more self reliant or adaptable. Like if you go somewhere, you kind of have to, I don't know, it can open your eyes to see like how resilient you actually are when you're faced with these challenges of like, ooh, how do I even navigate like taking the bus? Or how do I get from A to B?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know anyone. I better kind of put myself out there. So I think that can be one of the upsides. But of course, with that, like starting over in a complete new place is challenging
yeah,
and it can be
for
scary.
sure.
Um, like I think I like to think of it as like, you're embracing kind of the journey of life. Like even with you, embracing that, hey, this is a chapter of my life. It doesn't have to be forever. I don't need all the answers.
Yeah,
Danielle and I can figure it out as we go
yeah,
and then come home, see how we feel, make the decision and not plan everything, but know that you'll always have this kind of really amazing like time in your life, I guess.
yeah. I think
Um, mhm.
I think this is one that I'm currently going through in terms of one of the greatest challenges is one of the toughest things is that you might actually really like the place, and this is more for that slow travel. You might really like it, and
Yeah.
like when you go to Dominican with your friends, it's like yeah, we're going for a week, you know. When
Yes.
when you do that, whatever 2 week island hop trip in Europe between Greece and Croatia, like that's a 2 week, 3 week trip, right? When you bring that little backpack with you, like there's a finality that you can already seek. The
Mm.
hardest thing here has been realizing how great the world is outside of this bubble I've lived in, and having to now understand because I grew up in Toronto, or not in Toronto. I grew up around Toronto. I've lived in Toronto. That's been my bubble. That's all I've known.
Yeah.
And when you see not just great how another place is, but there's all of these places, right? There's all of these great things that you can experience. It almost it's really hard to just accept what you have And now I
Mm.
feel really torn, where it's like I'm like conditioned to think, be home with your friends and family, follow that career that you have been dying to have. And now it's like, oh man, but am I really? Is that's it? Like, there's so many other great places to try out, and yeah, it becomes this whole new stress of like, okay, do I am I done traveling? Is and then it's like, well, if I go back, does that necessarily mean I'm done traveling, or I'm just not going to get to travel as much? So it puts this whole other weight. Once you kind of open that, Pandora's box, you can just it's hard to go back inside and just go back to structure, you know?
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective. And like, I think what can also be is you realize, wait, like, do I want to put roots down here? And then that is the scary thing of like, we're at that age where it's like, okay, every time I go online, I see someone else who's engaged or getting
Yeah,
married or having a
no,
baby. And it's like, that's amazing for them. I'm not there yet.
yeah,
But it's crazy to think once you get to that point, you're less likely to kind of uproot your whole life. And so, in a way, there is sometimes a bit of pressure of like, okay, we have to make a decision
yeah,
depending on what you want out of your life
yeah,
at this point, right?
yeah. I think like for people who maybe listen to this and are considering, I don't think you will ever regret the aspect of
Mm,
traveling. Like you're not going to be like, oh, that made no. I've never heard anyone say that. Like, I mean, if you're
yeah.
booking a 3-star resort in Cuba, yeah, you might regret that. Don't force something that you're not, super excited for and has a big upside. But people who just go with it, you're gonna enjoy it. And yeah, it might bring on new problems, but it's almost like quote unquote like when people say rich people's problems, like it's a good problem to have. I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean this in like a monetary sense. I mean it's a good problem to have that, oh, you have found a new place that you like. You've had new experiences that you've enjoyed so much that you have a tough challenge now of where it is you want to settle down. So um,
Mm-hmm.
whereas this is a tough problem, and I really resonate with you with the laying down roots. Like Danielle and I are genuinely going through that right now. It's we're at a point where I like we know we're going to be together, and
Yeah.
do we settle down here where we are really really happy and we really enjoy
Yeah.
life here, and for me and her, it's like a conversation constantly about people versus place. Like
Mm.
we both agree that our people are back in Canada, but we also
Yeah.
really do both agree that this place we enjoy more than the place that we're from. So it becomes a really tough paradox.
Yeah, and then I almost wonder like is there a happy medium where like you find another place that's closer
Yeah,
but like not quite where you always have been?
yeah,
Like I've been thinking about going to Vancouver for the
yeah,
summer, and I didn't know how early I wanted to like share this on the pod cuz everything is still kind of up in the air.
yeah,
But for me and like me kind of thinking about like, okay, how am I going to make this happen? What am I going to do with this apartment? Am I going to sublet or am I going to just like end my lease and kind of let myself just explore, maybe put some stuff in storage and like, so that's been a big thing on my mind of
yeah,
how do I make it happen? And I think when we focus too much on like planning and like how am I going to make it happen? What is the best option? Like you can get stuck in trying to figure everything out.
yeah.
So I've been kind of letting myself just like go through all the options, and I booked a flight with
Wow.
no return date. Yeah, that was my first step actually. My first thing was like I'm going to book a flight for early July. I got a ticket that was flexible, so like if I have to change it,
Yeah,
I can. But my whole thing with like even just like manifesting and like making things happen, I think you need to take some action to show almost like to show the universe you're like serious about it. Like not to get too like
yeah,
woo woo, but I think when you take any sort of action towards like the goal, it's like, okay, well now I have to find an apartment there. Now I have to find a sublet. Now I have to like things are in motion because I've done the one thing of like booking a flight,
yeah.
you know?
That's awesome.
So I feel good about it and I'm excited, and it kind of became like I guess it started as okay, why don't I just sublet this place for 2 months? I'll go there and then I'll come back. And then it became, well, what if I really like it there? Then I'm going to be forced to come back, deal with this apartment, and then go back.
Mm.
And then, there was all these other options. And I was like, well, what if I go there, I get rid of this apartment, and then I don't really like it? Then I come back, I have to kind of start fresh here too.
Yeah.
So there's so many sides. And I think what I want to make clear is I've kind of been going through those pros, cons, what ifs. And like, it's sometimes at some point you have to like let go and just see how things kind of develop.
Yeah.
And like do the research, but don't feel like everything has to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think like what you're discussing as well is like how important it is to keep doors open. I think sometimes we stress over the finality of things, like give up this apartment, and it's like, well, if you can sublet it, then do it, because
yeah.
keep that flexibility for yourself open, and when you feel confident making a decision, and you say, oh, maybe I am happier in Vancouver, BC, wherever you're going to be in BC. You can let it go when it's on your terms, but don't rush the finality of anything, right? And
Exactly.
even the way you bought your ticket, like you bought it in a flexible manner, which keeps, options open for you. If something happens and you need to push it back, or the fact that you bought it, now you have that real option to go to Vancouver. That's so exciting. I'm excited for you. Is it Vancouver?
Thanks.
Is that where you pick?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah. So gonna give it a shot.
Yeah.
Who knows? I feel like I'm in that mode of not feeling stuck, but just feeling like I'm kind of ending a certain chapter in my life and kind of wanting to start some new things. So I kind of felt like
You know what they say about Vancouver, though, right? No one comes
that
back.
I'll never come back.
Yeah, no one comes
Yeah.
back. You're gone. And that
I know.
it fits your vibe. I can see you thriving out in Vancouver.
Could you not though?
No,
I'm
I
kind of
really-
excited. Like, I feel like I could be a Vancouver girl.
Yeah. No, I think that's great.
So we'll see.
And yeah, like that's when you talk about a new place. Like me and Danielle have really considered British Columbia as well, because I do feel like as far as Canada goes, that is the most versatile part. You can get
Yeah.
that big city vibes, but nature's right there. Yeah, that's good. I'm excited for you. That'll be a really good opportunity.
Yeah, and like I've never, and again with the slow travel thing, it was like, okay, do I want to go visit, BC for like a couple weeks this summer? And then
Yeah.
I was like, but the cost of like buying a flight, getting an Airbnb,
Yeah.
trying to find people to travel with, like sometimes that is just as expensive as me saying, okay, what if I sublet? Then I'm breaking even, if not paying less, if I like, have a roommate or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
again, things are still up in the air, but it's like, then I can take my time and actually see BC and not feel like, again, I'm trying to squish everything into a 2-week
Yeah.
travel. So that was the motivation. And then I was like, wait, why would I not just go for the whole summer?
Yeah.
And then it became, what if I just go and not sure if I would
Yeah.
come back? Like give myself the option.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And it's good seeing you so excited for it. And you always find a way to do that. You find something to be excited about and just do. And that's awesome. It's good. It's great to see that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. So I guess really quick before we wrap up,
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about a few ways that people can kind of make this slower travel experience happen. If you're listening and you're thinking, okay, you guys have kind of convinced me to maybe try out a new place. How do I actually make that happen? So I guess one of the ways would be, this is probably for someone who's a bit younger, but when I went to France, I actually was an au pair.
Yeah.
So that is when you live with a host family, and you're kind of like a live-in nanny, and your responsibilities can vary. For me, it was really, I picked the kids up from school, hung out with them in the evening. Sometimes I took them to school, but then I had like the whole day to myself to explore. Weekends were mostly free. So if anyone's listening who's like maybe in their early 20s or just finishing up university and you kind of want an experience, being an au pair is a really great way. And you kind of have I really enjoyed having a host family because they could tell me what to do, and it was like a comfort to know I wasn't completely alone.
Yeah.
And then I guess another one is like working wise. So maybe can you talk a little bit about your job and like how you found a
Yeah.
job out
Um,
there?
Newsflash for people, if you're living in Ontario, not everywhere in the world is it very challenging to find a job. As you and I both know, as teachers, it's very challenging to find a job, hold on to a job. Um, they're dying for teachers in Australia, so this was the easiest job I've ever landed in my life coming out here. So to be more specific with that, um, you know, you have to talk to people. I had no idea what the hiring practices were, but I've had friends that have come out here and worked as teachers. So, you're probably not the first person to be seeking the adventure or the move that
Mm,
you're doing. I even messaged people who I didn't know them that well, but I knew that they did it. So, it requires a little bit of bravery to do that. But, rely on other people. And even if you don't know anyone, if you get online, you can do that. But the other thing is be flexible in what your expectations are for work. If your goal is to go to a place, um, I have a friend who moved out here, and he was seeking a very similar job to what he had in Toronto, and he's had to be a little bit more flexible towards what that job is. So what I would say is don't feel like you have to have, like I'm saying, like it all figured out right when you go.
mm,
Maybe you're going to work in hospitality for a little bit. Like I'm sure it wasn't your dream job to, be an au pair, but you did what you had to do to make that experience work. And if that
yeah.
means you're going to work, at a restaurant as a bartender for a little bit, if you're going to work, a lot of these places like different hotels and hostels, like they'll cover some of your living expenses or a lot of your living expenses if you work for them. So
Mm,
try to be creative is what I would say in how um, you're going to sustain yourself while you're going there. And sometimes it's just about getting there first and then, walking around. Like that's what my girlfriend did when she got to Melbourne. She didn't have a job lined up here. I mean, granted, she's still doing her master's, but she had nothing figured out. She came here, she talked to a bunch of different people, and now she has two different jobs that she really enjoys. So you can't always have it all figured out, and you just need to be creative and be open minded to different types of jobs to make it work while you're there.
yeah, I think that's a really good perspective, especially for, if you have a little bit of money saved up to get there and get yourself on your
Yeah,
feet and then apply. Because also depends on where you end up living. Like you might not have a good gauge of like how far things are.
sure.
Like if I get a place in Vancouver and then I want to, try to find a job there before and it ends up being super far away,
Yeah,
then I'm going to kind of need to rethink that. So even just getting to know the area a little bit, giving yourself some time to like be a tourist and
yeah,
explore and then start work if that is a possibility.
yeah.
When you were doing your teaching, like did you go through kind of an agency to help you find a teaching job or how did it work
Oh
for
man,
you?
I'm not gonna bore people with too much of this, but yeah, I did try to do the agency. Like, don't do that. They wasted so much of my time because they're working with
Mm,
thousands of people, right?
yeah.
At one time. If you can, do the research yourself. Like I contacted schools directly. I contacted other
Mm,
teachers directly, and they were so much more helpful. Um, because when you're working with an agency, you're on someone else's timeline, and again,
yeah.
that might be different in other people's field of work, but I genuinely think making personal connections with people who are, in that field that you're trying to work on is way better.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I even found when I was starting teaching, like originally before I became an au pair, I was considering teaching English somewhere
yeah,
else. And I found like all the agency jobs, a lot of them like didn't have proper salaries or it seemed like
it's
I
messy.
wasn't going to be making proper money
Yeah,
like through the kind of work abroad type websites.
yeah,
So I do think, you know, if it's not an exchange and you want to actually go and live somewhere,
mhm,
it could be worth it just to sacrifice some stuff, do the research, dig in
yeah.
yourself.
And that's another good word. I've seen there's a lot of opportunities for like house exchanges, which I know can be like a crazy concept, but there's a massive network out there for if you're living in a pretty urban area, Like if you're from Toronto listening to this, or you're from Vancouver, and you want to go live across seas, like there's a massive network for people who will do a full exchange where you exchange your house,
Yes.
your car, even your pets. Like it's a crazy concept, but
Okay. I'm happy you brought that up because in my kind of Vancouver search, like I've been looking at different things because there's also like house sitter websites
yeah,
where like people will let you live in their house for free just to take care of their
yeah,
pets. So I was even looking on that as like, is anyone leaving for an extended period of time and has
yeah,
like a cat?
yeah,
Because then you have like a free stay.
yeah,
But
for sure.
I was looking at the home exchange and like where I live, it's probably a bit too, you know, I'm out of the city, so it's not as like desirable, I guess. But I did see some like home exchange website I was looking at of like, you write in what destination you're hoping for,
Yeah,
and then you wait for people to kind of
yeah,
reach out, or you can reach out. My aunt and uncle did used to do home exchanges.
yeah,
They're a bit older, so I don't know what website they would have used, but it's a pretty cool concept
yeah.
because then you're living for free,
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think
essentially.
in talking about your problem where it also keeps your property in good hands. Like you don't want it, you have a really nice apartment. It's in a good location.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to lose that, you it gives you some security of what's going on back at home. And you can also feel trusted, like, okay, this person's trusting me with their home. I could probably trust them in my own home as well. So I think that, yeah, I think that's
Exactly.
a really good opportunity. Now, that might be a little niche for people that are listening to this, or a little bit too big of a risk, but it is something worth looking into, is what I would say. You'd be surprised
Yeah.
at also how nice some of the places you can find. Like you would never get a chance, and you really get that opportunity to feel like you're living somewhere because you're not going to an empty apartment, right? You're going to a lived-in home. It feels, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So
Yeah, which is also why I liked the au pair experiences because I'm like immersed with this family and like
yeah,
I got the full French experience,
yeah.
you know?
What's the
Um,
movie? That Christmas movie, The Holiday? Is that what it is?
yeah,
There you
yeah, they
go.
swap or
There
something.
you go.
That's my mom's, I feel like that's my mom's favorite movie, but I
Great
have
movie.
not watched it in a long time.
Yeah.
I'll have to go
Mark it
back and
down.
watch it. And I guess like the last thing I would say, anyone who works remote,
Mhm.
like you can talk to your employer and even ask if you can shift hours slightly depending on your job or as long as you're going to make a certain meeting time,
Yeah,
but anyone who works remote, I feel like you already have an advantage of being able to kind of do it from anywhere. So you could definitely look into like, what are like the tax
yeah,
requirements and like, is it something your work actually allows for you to work from somewhere else?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's another kind of good option if you're open to trying to see somewhere new.
yeah. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we covered kind of a lot in this episode. Do you feel like we missed
Of
anything?
course we did. It's tough to cover it all within an hour, but and as cliche as it sounds, like if it's something that you're considering, especially if you've been considering considering it a while, that means that you want to do it. And as cliche as it
Yeah.
sounds, like just do it. Um, the good thing about home is you can always come back, especially if you have
Mm.
friends and family. Like people will always welcome you back, and you're just not going to regret trying something different, even if it's something
Yeah.
that you don't enjoy as much as you think you might enjoy. You're going to have great experiences. You're going to learn things. You're going to try new things, and I mean that's invaluable. So
Yeah. And you're just like embracing the journey
yeah,
that is life. And I think whether it ends up being the best decision of your life or you don't like it, you can always go back. You can meet new people. Like, I don't know. I feel like the pros outweigh the cons. And I would definitely kind of reiterate what you said about if you've been thinking about it or hearing us talk about it excited you in some way, like
yeah,
definitely take some action, even just in researching and just deciding, well, where would I even want to go?
yeah,
Because you might not even know. So just take that first little step of like doing some research, figuring one thing out that might get the ball rolling.
for sure. That's awesome.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thanks, Jordan, for being back on the pod. Hopefully, we can do this again very soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me back, Vic. It was too long that it's been since we've been able to chat, but it's always fun chatting with you.
Yeah, me too. Likewise. Okay, bye everyone. See you
Okay,
next time.
bye.